Good morning, and I trust your day has started off well. My name is Lillian Muli, and it's time for Citizen Extra. We are starting today's broadcast with the nurses' strike, which is currently ongoing. It's a key challenge for the health sector, and the nurses are striking over delays in pay since June 7th, 2017, that is this year, and it continues to affect access to health services. We'll be talking about where we are at, or where the nurses stand in as far as their grievances, with my guest in studio this morning, Fred Kissy, Vice Chair, Kenya National Union of Churches and of Nurses, I beg your pardon, and Brian Mutie, who is a political analyst, will be looking at issues surrounding the nurses' strike. Before that, let's cross over to Uasin Gishu County, where we'll be talking to John Wanyama, who will be updating us on the state of affairs there in as regards the nurses. Are they at their workstations? Are they continuing to air their grievances? And if so, what exactly are they saying? John Wanyama, what do you have from Eldoret?
Okay. Thank you, Lillian. And here I'm at Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, where more than 800 nurses are on strike. And Lillian, as you know, yesterday nurses had a rough time here at Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital after police were forced to shoot live in air and also to tear gas them, after they had tried to force themselves into hospital just to try to remove those whom they believe have gone back to work. Over 200 nurses are believed to have gone back to work in Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, and nurses who are on strike are feeling like they have betrayed them since they were on this course together. Lillian, you'll remember that Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital is the largest hospital in the country, second largest hospital in the country, and today patients are really suffering here in Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, and they have vowed that there is no retreat, no surrender for nurses until their CBA is fully signed by Sarah Serem, so that they can go back to work. Lillian, here in Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, things are not looking good, as so many people can expect. It's growing worse and worse every day, and many people are asking themselves questions: when, how, and when will they live like this? When will the government chip in, and why is the government silent on this nurses' strike? So Lillian, from my side, we are still looking for these stories and many more once we get the facts and details on this, as we will get back to you and our viewers to inform you what is really happening here. Behind me, Lillian, just to inform you, nurses are already assembling here again. We don't know where they are going also to get a gift of tear gas from policemen here, but we will inform you once we get these facts right. Back to your studio, Lillian.
Thank you for that, John Wanyama. They're updating us on the state of affairs in Uasin Gishu County, and specifically in Eldoret at the Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital. The state of affairs there, a replica of the state of affairs across the country. With me in studio is Fred Kissy, Vice Chair, Kenya National Union of Churches. Good morning. Let's begin with, you know, we do understand that there are some nurses that are trooping back to work. What has informed their decision to get back to their workstations? Fred.
In Moi Teaching and Referral Hospital, actually, as you are saying, that there are no nurses who have gone back to duty, but as you are aware, yesterday they have their normal corner where they assemble and address their members. So when they were trying to access the area, what happened is that the police were called and tried to harass them, but later on you are aware that they went back and addressed their members.
Let's go back to the genesis of this strike, and ideally what it is that the nurses want, want given to them so that they can get back to their workstations.
Well, as we are aware that last year, that was December 2014, on 14th, rather 2016, on 14th, the nurses entered into a return to work agreement after the strike. And the return to work agreement, there were clear timelines set on what was to happen as being in January. January, we were to start negotiating a CBA, which was to be concluded by March 2nd. So when March 2nd reached, we are not concluded. The Council of Governors sought a 2-week extension, which was given. So we continued engaging until early May, when we concluded the CBA. Then we were given a date to go and sign. That was on 11th May. When we went to sign, what happened is that they brought people who were not legally recognized to sign the CBA, and the chairman of the negotiating team wrote the COG and the Minister of Health, wanting them to send the right people to come and sign the CBA. So we were given a second date, which was 2nd. But before that, on 23rd May, we issued a notice, a strike resumption notice to the COG and the Minister of Health, telling them the come 2nd, if the CBA would not have been signed, then on 5th we were to resume our strike, which was suspended in December 2016 on 14th.
Brian, over to you. Looking at the manifestos, this week's manifestos, which clearly outlined what Jubilee and NASA intend to do for the health sector, is there an end in sight for the nurses strike? We're heavily into the campaign season right now, and both sides of the political divide have steered clear over the conversation, particularly, on the grievances raised by medics. We do know that there's a culture of industrial action in the health sector, doctors, nurses as well, now, expressing their grievances over delayed pay. Is there an end in sight? Do you think that this issue will come to an end?
Absolutely. I'm very positive that this stalemate will be resolved amicably, but when is the biggest question, when this shall be resolved. Actually, this has been a big issue, Lillian, considering the fact that, politically speaking, we are in an atmosphere which is not really conducive for negotiations, because whole system seems to be focused on the political aspect and all the issues of campaigns and also issues of manifestos. But the most important issue seems to have taken a backstage in terms of addressing the issues of healthcare. If you look at our constitution, of course, Article 43 talks about economic rights and social rights, and matters of health are pertinent issues of the first sub-article, which talks about improved health care for all, universal health care, and therefore that seems to have been taken to the dustbins, and this is unfortunate. But going to what they provided, the two sides of the coin, of course, the Jubilee and the NASA, of course, they were very elaborate in terms of what they have in store in terms of addressing the issue of healthcare. Of course, one of the sides, of course, was on record that they are really blaming the current government for the woes that nurses are going through, and also the patients. And when you look at the SDGs that provide the universal healthcare, also at the 17 talking points, number 3, of course, emphasizes the needs to improve the healthcare of the people of this country. And it will be a big gamble if the government today is not taking these matters seriously with the weight that it deserves, owing to the fact that it is likely to earn some points if they handle the issue properly. They are likely to lose some points if they are not going to handle the issue properly. And therefore, this should be an avenue for Jubilee government as of right now to ensure that it reaps maximum in terms of negotiation, in terms of addressing the plight of doctors, because addressing the issues of nurses, will be as well as addressing the issues of the patients and citizens as well.
And, to you, Fred, we do understand that there's a meeting that's slated for this morning. Is that still on? Who's expected to be in attendance, and indeed, do you expect that a consensus will be reached on the way forward? Give us details on today's planned meeting.
Okay, last week our team did meet with the Minister of Health officials, and actually the team is supposed to address the issues affecting the nurses working at the national level. Last week we didn't reach an agreement, so the meeting was again slated for today, and it's likely to kick off at 10:30, and let's hope that something good will come out of it.
Who is expected to be in attendance?
We have a negotiating team comprising of both the national officials and some officials from Nairobi County.
And, you know, Brian, clinicians have also threatened to go, you know, on strike. Again, you know, going back to the culture of, you know, industrial action in this country, and indeed the support that some of these, you know, institutions are getting from trade unionists so close to the August polls. Is this premature? Is this deliberate? Is this, you know, indeed, is there integrity behind any of these acts? Do you see there are real concerns? Do you think there are real concerns here, or are these institutions taking advantage of the fact that this is an electioneering period?
Of course, you can't rule both of the issues that you have raised, Lillian. Of course, being an electioneering period, you expect infringement on matters of these grievances being raised, and it raises an eyebrow whether they are legitimate issues or they are actually, you know, instigated by the political forces of today. But I also want to say that the honor still remains with how Sarah Serem is going to smart out of the issue, in the sense that she needs to deploy some of the best mechanisms to ensure that the government that she actually works for is not really affected by this kind of arrangement. But I want to say that as much as the clinicians and the nurses and the doctors have all the rights according to the Constitution to raise these genuine issues, we also need to look keenly on the political space and see whether we need to detach the political aspects from this issue. And I'm worried because at the end of the day, it's Wanjiku and Otieno who are going to suffer most of these from most of these issues. Owing to the fact that this being an electioneering period, he might be swayed to vote alongside certain sides because of the way the messaging will be done. But I also want to take this challenge again to the government of the day, that as much as we are addressing the issue of manifestos, let's also ensure that when we address the issues of healthcare on the manifestos, we are also able to resonate with the practicability aspect of it by ensuring that at least we intervene amicably on this matter.
And, you know, to you, Fred, the Ministry of Health, we do know, has thrown its weight behind an application seeking to have the nurses' strike called off. You know, essentially, the industrial action by the Kenya National Union of Nurses is said to be premature since negotiations on the CBA are still ongoing. Again, concerns on the timing of this industrial action and the fact that, you know, there's a crisis in the health sector, seemingly because, you know, we do know the critical role that nurses particularly play.
Yes, Leon, as I said earlier, by March this year, we were to conclude that CBA. But nurses were patient enough. It's now coming to end of June, more than 3 months down the line. So ours is that we negotiate in good faith and agree with the employer. The issue of Sarah Serem now coming later on and saying that the CBA was not there, that the negotiations are going on, we don't understand, because as far as we are concerned, the negotiations were concluded in March. So all we are waiting for is for the both levels of government to call us and we sign the CBA and we stop the suffering of Kenyans.
But why subject innocent Kenyans to suffering and yet negotiations are still ongoing? Why not return to work? Because you have been given communication that, you know, there is an end in sight.
Actually, you know, it's not always the wish, and it has never been the desire of nurses to see Kenyans suffering. And actually, strike is always the last resort when it comes to nurses. But when we are pushed to the wall, as it is now, we have been patient enough. Actually, I would say this is not even a nurses' strike, it's the government strike, because it's the government that has failed to act. And to this end, in fact, we are calling the president to act, because, you know, the head of this state, he holds the key. If he talks and directs his officers, they will act and end this strike. The
president, yes, so you're calling on the president to, you know, intervene, you know, and possibly mediate, but then health is a devolved function, and therefore, how do you see that working? The fact that, you know, the respective governors, you know, in respective counties are the ones that are essentially in charge of budgets that would, you know, essentially bring an end to the woes of the respective nurses in the different counties.
Okay, we cannot say that health is completely developed, it's partially developed. And it's very clear that the mandate of setting standards is the mandate of national government. even when it comes to remuneration, they are the ones who to set salaries, of course, with the advice from Saraserem. So what the national government sets is what is to be adopted by the county government. So you cannot say that county government, as much as they are autonomous, they are able to set salaries.
Lillian, just if you
Brian, would you like to respond to that?
Absolutely. If you listen to my brother here and the previous guests who have talked here as part of the officials of the issues of nurses and the clinicians, you'll agree with me that there were some gray areas as far as the agreement of the CBA is concerned. Some of them were on record, or have been on record, saying that the matter was never concluded conclusively, for that matter. And you can also ascertain with me to the fact that Saraserem is on record that she is on the process of streamlining the issues of remunerations for all public officers and civil servants. And I want to say that the issue of the CBA for nurses has really put this kind of equation, the works of Saraserem Commission, into jeopardy, in the sense that her commission is trying to balance or find a balance or a rhythm in how to juggle between increasing, exclusively on the perks of the nurses, while not increasing the issues of the other workforce. Public service workforce. So that kind of quagmire, that kind of hard and rock situation where Saraserem Commission has found itself, perhaps is part of the contribution to the issue why the nurses' settlement has not been resolved. But I also want to say that it would be important if nurses appreciate the fact that they still belong to the public service bracket, and they are not special in any way apart from their special work that they do, in the sense that they can be isolated or enumerated isolatively from the other public service workforce. And therefore, that is a big challenge to Saraserem. And maybe, if I would advise the nurses today, perhaps is to ensure that they exercise the so-called decorum and the discipline in terms of negotiation by a way of being a little bit flexible, not hiding some cards on the table, not having the trigger on their finger as they try to negotiate, as we try to get an amicable solution to this problem.
And who should then, mediate in the deadlock between nurses and the employer? We know that the Central Organization of Trade Unions has offered to mediate. They've not been successful as yet. So who should be that mediating factor? Who should play that mediating role?
That's for me, Lillian.
Who should mediate, in this deadlock between the nurses and the employer?
Absolutely. They have all the rights to be unionized members. They have all the right to belong to a union which, tries to address their issues. That's according to the Constitution. They have all the rights. And to me, the modality of the negotiation is perhaps what they got it wrong from the word go. Perhaps some membership of the union of nurses, perhaps they did not get it right. Perhaps they never got the right information. Some of them are already, working with the notion that there was a CBA, written or conclusively, but others are aware that the matter was not concluded conclusively or was not actually agreed upon by Saraserem and the other parties involved, and therefore the honor still remains with the union, the nurses union and all that. The officials need to sit down, tone down their egos, be able to have an open mind when approaching the issue with a aim of getting white smoke at the end of it.
Actually, it's not the issue of ego as such, because as I said earlier, on 11th, you were called to sign a CBA. Which CBA did they call us to sign? If there was no CBA at all.
Some officials said there were no, the matter was not conclusively, if you may get me right, the matter, according to the officials, is that the matter could not have been concluded because there were some still undertaking from Saraserem in terms of an exercise that was aimed at streamlining the pay packs of all public officers, and this could not have been expedited in the sense that it could have collided with what the direction would have come from Saraserem in terms of harmonizing the pay packs for all public workforce, and therefore isolating the issue of nurses alone and remunerating them aside or in isolation could not have gone well with the spirit of negotiation as far as the bigger picture is concerned.
There are issues I want to put clear that probably the public does not understand. One is that the issue of salary and house allowance, these apply to all civil servants, and that was set aside. What was negotiated were peculiar allowances, unique allowance to nurses. And those are the allowances we concluded they should be on. So the salary and house allowance was not tackled because it applies to all other civil servants. I
can still agree with you on that matter.
So, and the issue that their officials are not agreeing, who are saying that the CPA was not concluded, there is no official of the nurses union who is saying, except those ones whom the government is using. Of course, in any war, you always have your opponent getting somebody from your side to fight on their side.
Personally,
well, gentlemen, we'll come back to this very shortly. As we continue with exactly what issues the nurses are outlining in as far as their grievances and what essentially will take them back to their work stations. There's been a back and forth over the CBA and the fact that it has as yet not been signed, and we will be getting into discussions surrounding that very shortly. But before that, NASA enters day 2 of its campaigns in Narok, and Stephen Letour has been following the NASA campaign trail and will be giving us an outline of what the itinerary is expected to be today. Let's cross over now to Narok and listen in to what's happening on that end.
Hi Lillian, and a very good morning to you there and your panel in studio. Indeed, like you've put it, the National Super Alliance team led by Raila Odinga, who is their presidential candidate, are hitting the ground running for the second day, drumming up support for the NASA manifesto that was launched a fortnight ago at the Ngong Racecourse. And today, yesterday, first of all, they started combing through areas of Transmara, where they toured Emurua Dikir and Nosa in areas that is in the lower side of Narok County. And today they are embarking on the heart of Narok County, that is Narok town. But first things first, this morning they are splitting into 2 brigades, one being led by Raila Odinga and another one being led by Kalonzo Musyoka, who is the National Super Alliance running mate. Raila Odinga is going to tour the Mau forest, the entire Mau complex. He is expected to address areas like Olchori, and he will be accompanied by Moses Wetangula and ODM aspirants in this particular county, that is Joseph Tiampati Musuni, Ledamo Lekina, as well as the Member of Parliament for Narok North, Moitalel Olekenta. And the second team, led by Kalonzo Musyoka, Musalia Mudavadi, Chama cha Mashinani leader Isaac Ruto, as well as the CCM gubernatorial aspirant Patrick Olentutu, who is also the Member of Parliament for Narok West, touring that side of Ngoswani Market, that is in the side of Masai Mara. So they will be at the western side of Narok County, while the team A will be in the northern side where the Mau complex is situated. It is interesting where the Raila Odinga is taking this issue. For instance, yesterday they were in the lower part of Narok County, and they spoke widely about the issue of land, that is revisiting his remarks that he made in Lodokilani in Kajiado County. And today he is taking his campaigns to the Mau forest. Remember, Lillian, the Mau forest issue has been a hot political potato, as may take it. It has been a matter that in every election politicians go there to use it as a campaign tool. For instance, going there today, there has been a lot of issues in terms of resettlement of people who live inside that particular forest. There is the issues to do with the people who had been evicted earlier on and they are back in that particular forest. There is the issue of the natives of this particular area saying that they are not going to access that particular forest and safeguarding that entire complex as a water tower. Remember, it is an issue that has been there back even in 2002, 2007, and even in 2013. That particular issue was a hot political stuff in the run-up to every particular general election. And so today, once they are done with those split campaigns, Raila Odinga's team, Kalonzo Musyoka's team will converge in Narok town, where they have set their final rally at 2 p.m. That is in Narok Stadium, where they are expected all the entire Pentagon to be present and address their supporters in Narok town. Remember, this is also being regarded as a battlefield or a swing vote county, having about 341,743 voters to participate in the next next general election as per the cleaned up register by the IEBC released on Monday. And so that is what is going to happen here in Narok County. We are seeing they are also going to drum up support for their candidates, but there is a sibling rivalry between Chama cha Mashinani and ODM that is taking shape here in the county of Narok. For instance, ODM want to take charge of the entire exercise and block the Chama cha Mashinani candidates, particularly the gubernatorial seat, from accessing or whatever being seen in this particular forum. And so there is that particular show of might between ODM and CCM, and that of course we are also going to keep an eye to see how their supporters having in mind that there will be thousands of them here in Narok today to see how their sibling rivalry will play out. But most importantly, Lillian, there is change of tack by the National Super Alliance campaigns. For instance, they have been going to do something, they are drumming up support for their manifesto, and so that is what we are going to witness today. And remember, they have also set a series of rallies from tomorrow, that is in Migori County as well as Bomet County on Saturday. And so we are going to keep a close eye on that, as well as open our ears wide to ensure that we get each and every detail of the National Super Alliance campaigns here in the county of Narok. For now, Lillian, I will hand it back to you, but later on we'll be able to join back you in studio and give you the very latest from Narok County. Back to you, Lillian, in studio.
And, Stephen, before we let you go, you talked about the sibling rivalry between ODM and CCM, particularly with the gubernatorial position. Okay, I'm made to understand that Stephen Little cannot hear me at this point. I'll be forwarding those questions to him, particularly, you know, issues surrounding what the NASA brigade promises to offer to the Ma community. He talked about the land issue coming out very prominently in the campaign there, in talks that dominated their campaigns there in Narok. We'll be going back to Stephen Little as Citizen Extra continues. With me in studio, joining us in this discussion that on the NASA strike is Joy Mdivo. She is a political analyst, and we will be getting her thoughts as well on how, if at all, the culture of industrial action in this country is likely to affect the re-election of the ruling government, if at all. And we'll be getting back to that conversation shortly. But we want to cross over to Kisumu County now and hear from Laura Achieng on whether or not it is the same state of affairs there in as far as the nurses strike. Laura, if you can hear me, what is happening in Kisumu County? What are the nurses there saying?
Thank you very much, Lillian Muli. I get you loud and clear here in the county of Kisumu. And the nurses here are actually in solidarity with their counterparts all over the country, saying that until the CBA is signed, they will be refraining duty. Now, they are not on the streets today. We are speaking to some of the officials earlier this morning. They say they have traveled to Nairobi, of course, to see how the negotiations will go. But right now, there are no nursing services being offered in government hospitals and all government health facilities. On Monday, we had a spot check at the Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Teaching and Referral Hospital, where there was basically no activity at all. The doctors were not there, the nurses were not there, there was no health official, all saying that they were on holiday. Of course, it was the Eid al-Fitr holiday, that none of the health officials were on duty. And of course, today, the situation is the same. There are no nursing services at all being offered, whether they are outpatient or inpatient services that are offered by nurses, including immunization of children and of course offering antenatal care to women. So all that have been put on hold until the CBA is signed. That is according to the Kenya National Union of Nurses chairperson Kisumu branch, Flora Ambani. Back to you, Lillian.
That is Laura in Kisumu County. She says that the situation there is a replica of what we're seeing across the country. Fred, back to you. When, you know, in some counties such as Nyeri, we hear of the nurses finally calling off the strike, you know, because of their negotiations or deliberations with the county government. This disconnect across the counties, what's this about?
Actually, I would say that is propaganda, because there is no county that has called off the strike. Nyeri, of course, we had rumor that a few people were working, but all of them, the few were on duty, they were overwhelmed, they came out. So there is no county as now. Probably the only county that is shaky a bit was in Gishu, but all the rest of the country are on strike.
But you know, when you talk about some nurses going back to their workstations, you know, it points also at infighting and disunity, you know, amongst you as the union, because why do you have then some staff members reporting back to work in some counties in huge numbers, while in others people are staying put?
Well, those ones who are on duty, of course, they are emergency services, and these are supposed to be given by those ones who are in management. And I want to believe that even in Nyeri, the people who are told who are on duty are those ones in management, and they are offering minimal services. But the rest of the sub-counties, there is no work going on.
And Joy, let's rope you into this conversation. You know, your scope on the state of affairs. You know, the nurses strike now entering its third week, almost going into a month, and so close to the August polls as well. How, if at all, this, you know, affects both sides of the political divide, who came out very strongly in as regards of the health sector and revamping it, and yet we have a stalemate currently ongoing in as far as the nurses and their employer.
You know, there's a question you asked earlier about the culture of industrial action, especially as regards elections. I think people have learned the script from the best, because the people who perfected this were the teachers. The teachers' unions always used to time their strikes just before the elections, which happened to also be just before the final exams, and they were very effective in managing to get a quick conclusion to their matters because of the timing of their strike. Now, this is not to say that the nurses timed their strike to coincide with the elections, but you can understand why this is also an opportune time for industrial action to happen with the nurses, because it is a time when nobody wants to be seen to be hitting at the poor, to be hitting at those who are serving the poor, which is what the nurses do on a daily basis. And so the timing also is meant to put pressure on the government to be able to have a quick conclusion to the matter. However, to weigh in on what I've been listening to my brothers discussing, one of the things that stands out with this nurses strike is the level of information that the people on strike have regarding the action. The message is very clear. We have a CBA, it has been negotiated, all that's waiting is signature. Why are they insisting on this signature? Is because they saw what happened with the doctors who had a negotiation, had a CBA, but because it wasn't registered, it wasn't signed, lacked the force of law, and even after over 100 days on strike, they ended up going back to work with practically nothing of what was on the table. And so people have understood, unless a CBA has the binding force of the signature of the people who are supposed to implement it, then it is useless. And it's one of those things where the government ought to realize. Kenyans watch, Kenyans learn. If government can be in excess, can demonstrate opulence in their activities, there's no way then you can claim that there is no money to do this and to do that when it comes to a certain caliber of workers. I would wish that the nurses would sort of have a more humane approach, because the people who are suffering from the withdrawal of their services are the ones who really need it the most. And right now we've been lauding the success of NHIF, but even if you have NHIF now, it's not helping you any, because the places where you can access NHIF paid for services are the very ones that rely on these nurses. So in my opinion, we have the Sarasarem Commission, but it seems to be a stumbling block in things moving ahead. Sometimes we need to find a way of working around these issues so we can come to a speedy conclusion for the sake of the Wananchi.
Yeah, so a structured mechanism of addressing issues. Brian, I think you wanted to respond to what Joy is saying.
Oh yes, thank you, Lillian, and Joy, welcome on board. Just to bring you on to speed, I think matters of constitution are very important to us, and the way we interpret them is also very important. Sarasarem Commission is an independent office, and according to the constitution, of course, you know the doctrine of separation of power, what it dictates, that you give these institutions the leeway, the independence to act and to execute what the mandate gives them. And by saying that Sarasarem Commission is a stumbling block, to me that is a little bit far-fetched, in the sense that it has its mandate. Its role is clearly defined in the Constitution, that it is the sole body that has the mandate of ensuring that there is equity and matters of remuneration are really handled in a good way. And taking that out of Sarasarem, I think it will be a big mistake, in the sense that you have to give it what belongs to them. This is a mandate. Matters of nurses is a matter of public service mainstream. They belong to the public service mainstream. And if Sarasarem is in the process of harmonizing salaries, pay packs for every person, a situation becomes a catch-22 for her and her commission, in a way of balancing how do we isolate and remunerate this cadre in terms of what they are perceiving, telling us is a perceived special interest in terms of what they go through as a special bracket cadre. So how to balance this is a big issue, and therefore to me I'll call for what you have said. Call for sobriety, call for that humane kind of approach, and let's not just throw everything out there in the open and blaming, everyone for not doing his work, when the law is very clear that there are clear mandates, there are clear demarcations of who is supposed to do what. And for me, I like this idea of giving these institutions their free way to exercise their mandate according to the Constitution. When we implement the Constitution according to this spirit, we shall never go wrong in any way.
And Fred, as we begin to conclude this conversation, is there a structured way, is there a better way of reaching consensus on this issue? Because clearly there's been a lot of back and forth, a lot of blame game. How do you intend, as the National Union of Nurses, to bring an end to this? Is there a more structured way, as opposed to going on the streets, as opposed to boycotting work, which you've been clearly told is illegal?
Okay, Lillian, initially, in the first place, the evolution of health, minor structures, was a mistake in the first place. However, we are there. And as far as the Nurses Union is concerned, in fact, we see various arms of government discriminating against the Nurses Union. The other day you saw the government signing a CBA with the Civil Servants Union, or DEGE, and in their CBA, there was nursing service allowance and health service allowance, which they never negotiated. So for them, they have signed for them, but when it comes to nurses, they don't want to listen. Nurses, we are open to dialogue. And as I said earlier, it's the government which has a key. It's the government that is not sincere. If Sarasarem and other arms of government were sincere, they would have ended this stalemate. So for us, we are open to dialogue, and any time they are willing, because there is no way you can again go back to renegotiate what we had agreed with the employer.
The timing is suspect.
But Lillian,
let's conclude with your final thoughts, Joy.
I need to weigh in on what Brian said earlier. The reason why we have commissions in Kenya in the first place is because Kenyans are suspicious of government. The Sarasarem Commission, the Commission on Cohesion and Integration, all these commissions that we have formed are doing work that the government ought to be doing. They're not supposed to be there. The Sarasarem Commission, in my opinion, why I call it a stumbling block, it was put there as a buffer to try and curb excesses. But what was the first excess that we saw? When Parliament went in and they decided that they're going to adjust their pay packs, and what happens? All they do is hold the Sarasarem Commission hostage for a little bit of time, and they get everything that they want. But when it comes to other cadres of workers, then it becomes a constitutional commission with a mandate that is supposed to protect. It is time Kenyans have realized, by the way, what is good for the goose is good for the gander. The politicians cannot be having their way with the law, because it was created by them, so they think they can use it to manipulate them for their good. And they think that others don't learn from the best. And the nurses have learned from the best. The doctors did learn from the best. The fallout from the doctor strike, we lost 25% of the doctors who were in service. Many opted not to return to work. Others paid back the government for the training that they had received and went to peddle their wares elsewhere. Nobody's talking about that. We're still trying to look for doctors from Colombia. We've gotten to a place where we need to realize we have to treat people with the respect they deserve. And this time, the nurses, I am glad that they're sticking to their guns, because if they've learned from the doctors, if they don't, and they go back to work without that CBA being signed, they're not going to see the light of day, even if a new government comes into power.
Lillian, if I'm listening carefully to what Joy is alluding to, is that nurses still need to stick to their guns and continue subjecting Kenyans into
Joy, is that what you're saying, that nurses need to
stick
to their
because
guns?
they have a right
to die in hospitals across the country?
You're looking at the patient's right to live. versus the nurses' right to work and to be remunerated correctly for the work that they have done. But they are protected by the Constitution to defend their right to go to picket. This is protected by law. Strike action is protected by law. And you have a right to say, look, I'm doing a valuable service. Please pay me a just wage for the service that I'm offering. And if somebody doesn't listen, then the nurses have equal right to actually stay away from work until they get a formula that works.
I anticipated to hear solutions from Joy. I
That is a
anticipated to
solution.
hear Joy coming up with tangible solutions to end this stalemate, but I'm surprised if she's still advocating for Kenyans to continue wallowing in this kind of a mess. Patients going and others dying simply because nurses have to stick to their guns. That's unfortunate. Anyway, it's her opinion and she's entitled to her. But anyway, as I conclude on, sign out on this matter, Lilian, if you may allow me, I would want to say that the matters of the healthcare are so dear to us that we still need to see how we can actually make a devolution vis-a-vis the issue of healthcare actually work for the better of this country. And I want to say that as much as we want to say healthcare is a devolved function, to me it's still a shared responsibility between the county government and the national government. And finding that kind of balance, finding a convergence zone where we are able to address the issue of healthcare without constantly keeping Kenyans on this kind of subjection will be the ideal solution that this country needs. And I have a solution for this. If we are able to give counties that autonomy to be able to employ their own doctors, employ their own nurses, employ their own clinicians, just like the other mainstream employees of the counties, without treating them as a special cadre, that will be able to address the problem of these strikes once and for all. But the moment you still have some shared responsibilities detached or attached to the national government, we still be having this problem cropping every time and then.
And Fred, your final word on this, because I've consistently heard you talk about Sarah Serem and the fact that she and essentially the Salaries and Remuneration Commission has not been forthright in as regards the CBA. But then again, the SRC in its defense has given the Council of Governors the requisite support to guide the negotiations between you as nurses, and they say that they've not met the parameters in as far as budget allocations and what is essentially the recommended figure by the SRC.
Thank you. Just before I respond to that, I want to respond to my brother here. The nurses indeed are a special cadre, but the only unfortunate thing is that the nurses are not, their pay is not commensurate with their specialty. One, you are aware that the counties have various different employees.
What guidelines are you using?
There are those ones who are, just a minute, there are those ones who are, who came from the defunct local government. For example, somebody who came from the defunct local government, job group G, earns that 6,000 shillings. And the nurse, the same job group, earns 16,000 shillings. So when we are saying that we want, Sarah Serem wants to harmonize, and she has not done so. And when it comes to nurses, we are a special cadre. If we are not, the hospitals would be running today. We are 17 cadres in the health sector. But how many are working? The hospitals are closed. So when we say that we need special allowances, we are right to ask for that. So in conclusion, the nurses are not ready to go back to work until the government becomes sincere and calls us to the table and sets out modalities on how we are going to send the CBA.
So the nurses are sticking to their guns, and that is what we are getting here in studio from their representative here, who is Fred Casey, Assistant Chair, Kenya National Union of Nurses. Thank you very much for your thoughts on that. We are taking a very short break. We're coming into the second hour of Citizen Extra with more on the Jubilee and NASA manifestos, as well as the campaign agenda across the country as we fast approach the August polls. We're also expecting opinion polls to be released later today. We'll be looking at where each side of the political divide stands in as far as the voting patterns and what is expected to translate in the ballot come August. We're back with more in the next hour. Stay tuned.